Ja, herzlich willkommen zur neuen Ausgabe SI-Interview. Bei mir ist jetzt der Mark Selby von Canada Nickel Company. Und wie man schon im Namen sieht, geht es um Nickel. Ich habe keine Ahnung von der Firma selber, außer dass es um Nickel und in Kanada geht. Ja, ich bin einmal gespannt, denn eines dürfte man nicht vergessen, Nickel ist ein extrem wichtiges Metall in diesem Energiezyklus. Also wir brauchen es bei den Batterien, wir brauchen es, die Energiewende zu schaffen. Und ja, deswegen bin ich gespannt, was er uns erzählt. Mark, thank you for your time. I know you are on a road trip around Europe. You're now in Geneva, so in my time zone. After you have a lunch meeting with investors, so we keep it short and hopefully simple. And I say I have not too much clue about your company, but from your name, I would guess that you are based in Canada and you're looking for nickel. Is this right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Perfect. So, and nickel is, I said also in my German introduction, a very important component for the energy transfer. What we are already, especially in Europe, we are really in to transfer our energy consumption from gas and oil to more renewables. And we see also some hiccups with the nickel price itself. So yes. What is your feeling about the nickel price, and what is or was this also the reason why you started the company 3 years ago?
Yeah, so I've been in the nickel business 20 years. I started in the senior management team at Inco, which was the Western world's largest producer at that time. I took another nickel project from resource right through to fully permitted construction ready. That was last decade, in a decade where nickel was deeply out of favor. And again, this is where investors, are able to get outsized returns. When you can move into a metal when it shifts from being out of favor and into favor. Nickel, unlike every commodity, is cyclical. Nickel goes through these super cycles every 15 to 20 years. We went through one in the late 60s, one in the late 1980s, one in the mid 2000s, and with the big new demand coming from the EV sector, because nickel is the metal in a battery that gives the cars and trucks the longest range possible. We think we're going to head for another one of these nickel super cycles in the middle part of this decade.
Mm-hmm. You started this company 3 years ago. So that when I look at the chart, it's going much longer back. So, but this was not the same company what you have. I think to start with.
That's correct.
Was this a reverse merger, or what was this? How it starts?
Yeah. So literally the week after I left RNC Minerals, which was the other company, which is now Karora, and from the time I took over as CEO, we took a company that went from a 20 million market cap to a 700 million market cap today, and a share price that's nearly 8x what it was at that point. I was approached by a few investors who had backed these two micro cap Canadian companies to explore this property just north of Timmins, Ontario, which is a big gold mining camp. And they had made this nickel discovery. And these type of deposits that we go after are very easily definable by geophysics. They had put 4 holes into it, and it was very clear to me that this had the potential to be one of the largest nickel sulfide discoveries ever. And currently sits within just 3 years. It's already the 5th largest sulfide discovery in the world. If it was fully ramped up today, based on our PEA, we'd be the 5th largest nickel sulfide operation among all the big boys, Norilsk, Vale, BHP, and so forth. So again, the right kind of project in the right location. And we started in September 2019 as a private company. We raised $6.5 million. We started with hole 5. Today we're at hole 300. We'll have a feasibility study complete by year end. We filed for permits in July of last year, and with a goal getting permits by mid 2025 and into production by the second half of 2027. So an entire from first discovery to into production in 8 years, which is pretty close to record time
That's very unusual, especially in this time when all the governments or all the environment issue and so on and so on. The permitting process takes normally much longer than.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a huge barrier, and people underestimate the permitting risk for projects. And so again, I would encourage investors to really look at the specific location where a project is, and where we are is about as good as it gets. So we're located just north of Timmins, and Timmins is a 100-year-old gold mining camp. It's a community that's very supportive of mining activity. Where we're specifically located is about 30 minutes up a highway, and adjacent to that highway. So we have 60,000 people who are an hour's drive from the mine site, but there is nobody within 20 minutes. We have a highway, we have power lines in place, we have a rail line that we can extend 10 kilometers into the mine site. So you have all the major infrastructure that you need to build a big mining project. This area was owned by a forestry company for close to 100 years. So it's been logged multiple times. So we're not disturbing any pristine territory. And so, from a location to be able to permit it, it's about as good as it gets. And the project itself, the tailings and waste rock, unlike a lot of deposits which require, very strict storage, is basically considered non-deleterious. So the same as earth or dirt. So, that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of how we store it. And again, a lot lower risk to the environment because, the material itself is pretty harmless. In fact, our tailings and waste rock are a big bonus for this project because this type of nickel deposit is called ultramafic. And the host rock that makes up these deposits, and there are other companies that have them, there's not a long list of them, but there are a handful. They have this great property in today's world where the tailings and waste rock spontaneously absorb CO2 out of the air. So we can design a low carbon operation because we're in Ontario with low carbon hydroelectric and nuclear power. But then when you add in the ability of our tailings and waste rock to soak up the CO2, we can actually be in a position where we believe we can generate 20 tons of carbon credits per ton of nickel we'd produce. So we'd be generating of the order of 1 million tons of carbon credits per year when we're fully ramped up.
Is this already in a permitting process? So carbon credits takes time, and I have no really clue how this really works, but I know exactly you get something for the carbon credits. That's a very good bonus for a company. You are already in discussion how to do this, or how's
Yes, yeah. No, we've got one of our board members runs an organization in Canada, which is one of the sort of largest consulting firms, in this particular area. That we've come up with a process. Most people looked at measuring the carbon uptake in the tailings after you've deposited them. We've developed a new process, which we call in-process tailings carbonation, where as the material is going through the plant, you inject it with CO2 for a very brief period of time. But there's a few levers that you can play with, and instead of taking months or years to get to a zero carbon level, we can get there within 36 hours, and within a few days, I've gotten to that 20-ton carbon credit mark. So the great thing from a measurement perspective, that's the issue with a lot of these carbon credit schemes is the measurement of it is a little soft. If I provide somebody a gas stove, then they don't burn wood anymore. How do you continue to measure that on an ongoing basis? In our case, we'll have a pipe. We'll measure the carbon content at that point. It'll go through a couple of process steps, and then we'll measure the carbon, as it comes out of that pipe.
Okay, you as a standard is a chemical process where you the CO2 get a new I have not the English word for them chemical element where the CO2 is connected to the element. The rock absorbs this and make a new
CO2. And becomes a new mineral called magnesite.
Okay,
which is a magnesium carbonate mineral.
Okay. So understandable. First Nations. Canada is always a thing also with First Nations. How the things looks like in your area?
Yeah. So again, encourage investors. You need to look at the very specific region. Don't assume one province is all the same because it's very different by region. And again, this is an area where we're very fortunate because there's been a lot of mining activity, a lot of mining projects built. The First Nations groups in the area have, figured out, whose is whose. We at our last project signed the first impact benefit agreement with an Algonquin First Nation in the province of Quebec. And so when we started the company from day one, a focus on establishing good relationships with the communities, because it's their land, that we want to build this project on, and when you start with that premise and with an open approach, good things happen. And, we've got a slide in our investor deck, where you can see the quotes from the various First Nations chiefs, and they're happy with our project, our approach, and our people. And so, we don't see any issues in terms of being able to get through the permitting process as quickly as possible. In fact, they've been very supportive, and we've developed a number of innovative approaches in terms of how to, not only consult them, but actually have them engage and have them do the work on behalf of us for the project. So, and that's going very well.
I have also a slide in where it's called a Crawford high grade and Crawford standard grade. So what this mean, high grade and standard grade, and what for which grade we talk in general?
Okay, so it's the nickel concentrate. So we'll produce 3 products from the mine. There's a high grade nickel concentrate, we're calling a standard grade nickel concentrate, and then we have an iron chrome product, which is ideal to make stainless steel, because stainless is made up of iron, chrome, and nickel. In terms of the concentrates, typically with nickel, and this is something people don't appreciate, is it's really generally hard for a typical high grade deposit to make a high grade concentrate, because you have nickel with a pile of iron sulfides, and you can't separate those in the mill. So you could have a nickel deposit with a 3 or 4% nickel grade, and you make a 12 to 15% nickel concentrate. And a big chunk of the overall costs are in that downstream place, so that you can save a lot of money if you're able to produce a high grade concentrate. The type of deposit that we have is made up of 3 minerals. The typical nickel mineral is one called pentlandite, which is 33% nickel. In our case, we have 2 other nickel minerals, hazelwoodite and a warite, that are 72% plus nickel. And we have virtually no iron sulfides in the deposit. So when you put that material in the mill, what comes out of the flotation cell, if it's those 2 high grade minerals, is closer to 35. In a lot of cases, we're making 40 and 45% nickel concentrates. And then, we do have the other nickel mineral, pentlandite. And in that case, we're making somewhere in the range of 12 to 15% concentrate.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the price for the high grade is much, much higher than for the standard grade.
There's not so much difference, but it is definitely better, and it makes it easier to go into, people's flow sheets. At 40 or 45%, our concentrate would be about the same grade as what's called mixed hydroxide product, MHP, which is a key feed that goes into a lot of battery plants in China and Asia and globally. So.
There's also a slide in your presentation where you compare your project to other project in terms of acquisition values. So can I guess now that you are, maybe there's also a plan B or maybe the plan A, that somebody comes and take you over?
Yeah, so, we've, again, as an ex-Inco nickel industry guy for a long time, we've got access to, pretty much all the talent we need to be able to build the project. If you go to our people page up in the front part of the presentation, you'll see we've got 2 construction guys, Christian Brosseau, who's built 2 projects that are of the similar scale. They were gold operations, but there's big open pit mine mill operations. And then another guy, Desmond Tranquilla, who's not only a mine builder, but he's a civil engineer that also does road and construction projects. So we've got the team in place to push it forward. We think that's the best way to unlock value. I think the reality is most big mining companies want to get exposure to battery metals. And I'll use it as an example in terms of, again, these 180 turns that create a real value opportunity. BHP Billiton spent most of the 2010s trying to sell their nickel business and couldn't find a buyer for it. Literally all the way up to 2018, that operation was still for sale. In 2020, they decided, we start to like this battery metals theme. And then they've come out with a stated strategy now that their 3 metals are nickel, copper, and potash. Mm-hmm. And so, they've then made a whole series of acquisitions. They've basically bought up every nickel sulfide asset that's been around for more than 10 or more years. So stuff that's very well known to the market. Our deposit has only been known, for 3 years. This type of deposit is still relatively new to the market, and my belief is that, again, it's the right scale of, top 5 resource. It will be a top 5 producer. It's the kind of asset that a BHP or Rio Tinto or Anglo American wants to make. It'll take them, big companies, having worked in one, move slowly, but realizing that there's very few new nickel opportunities. And again, as an investor, go look at how many nickel names are out there. There's a tiny fraction of that relative to gold or silver or copper. And so, they're going to start looking hard at these type of deposits over the next year or two. And unless our share price is fully valued, unfortunately, I think we'll get taken out at some point in the next 12 to 18 months.
That brings me to the capex. What I can guess or imagine, what are the capex for this kind of project in general?
So the PEA was $1.2 billion, which was for processing 42,000 tons of ore a day. In the feasibility study, we're actually, because the battery industry keeps telling us, can you please produce more nickel sooner? So we'll start at a larger amount. So the number, will be that much much higher in the feasibility study. But, again, for big base metal projects, if you look at the copper projects in South America, they're all multi-billion-dollar projects. In our case, we've got the benefit of having all the infrastructure in place, and we don't have to spend $1 billion on infrastructure to spend another $1 billion to build the plant. So, we've got that advantage. And again, just some benchmarks in terms of other nickel projects. The 3 nickel sulfide projects that have been built in Canada, in the last have been built or are about to be built, are Vale is spending $980 million on a mine that'll produce 10,000 tons of nickel and about 13,000 tons of copper. Glencore is spending about $900 million on a mine that'll produce 15 to 20,000 tons of nickel per year. And Vale out of Voisey's Bay is in the process of spending nearly $1.5 billion on something, that'll produce 30 to 40,000 tons of nickel a year. So, that's the kind of check that this industry is used to. And so, again, our project will not scare off any majors in terms of, the kind of asset that they would want to own.
You talked before about shareholders and shareholder structure. So this shareholder structure is always an interesting point. So how the shareholder structure looks like in your case? Yeah.
So in our case, again, there's a few shareholders in these 2 small microcap companies that we effectively spun the asset out. It wasn't an RTO or anything like that. That core group of people, or about a dozen people, control about 40% of the stock. There's been several funds who've come in for smaller positions, and then the rest is relatively broadly held. Again, as nickel prices have now started to move higher again. In the last week, they've moved up over $24,000 a ton. We used a $17,000 a ton price in our PEA. I think as that and the funds get comfortable with the nickel story, after not necessarily investing in a lot of nickel, we still have all that upside of having the major funds come into the name. So,
when was the last private placement and which price?
Yeah, so we raised money in early March when the LME froze. We had been doing a significant amount of marketing, and we raised 53 million Canadian at that point. At a price, the regular stock was at $3.10. We raised some flow through at $3.60 and some charity flow through at over $4 a share. So that was the last big equity raise. And then in terms of capital going forward, we're in the process now of talking to some strategics, talking to some Korean offtake and other offtake partners. And so, we're pretty confident that, from the combinations of those investments, that'll give us the capital that we need to go from here to a production decision sometime in mid 2025. If we do an equity raise, the only reason we would do it would be to seed some of these larger funds, that need to have a starter position before they really start to accumulate a stock. So, but we're in good shape on that front.
Mark, I think it was a really great start interview. Very a lot of information, but you bring this very smart in a smart way. So that was really interesting. How much information we can get in 20 minutes. To be honest, it was really a great interview with a lot of information and a very quick development, I must say. Then normally it's not so easy to bring a project in this status in this short period of time. So it's how much you spent so far on the whole project.
Yeah, so that's the part. We've got a very we have we have an iterative design process. So again, rather than drilling for the sake of geological understanding, it's always been very focused on, we had our first model on the mine at our 10th hole, and we use that to guide the drilling and financial model and open pit design. So we use that to target the drilling. So we maximized the amount of meters we spent. So again, we've been able to take it and get it all the way from that first resource to what will be the biggest base metal mine in Canada for just $85 million in capital, which is very, very, very efficient. So
wow.
As a person with most of their net worth in the company, want to make sure that capital is well spent. So
wow, yeah, you do a great job. Yeah, thank you for the interview. Now I make a small German summary.
Sure.
Ja,
thank you.
Es ist Nickel, steht schon im Namen, Kanada ist auch. Was ein Wahnsinn ist, sie haben vor 3 Jahren eigentlich das Projekt erst übernommen, sind jetzt schon das 5. größte entwickelte Nickelprojekt auf der Welt. Man sieht es hier, also das ist eine Riesenleistung. Sie haben 85 Millionen bis jetzt investiert. Sie haben, was sehr spannend ist, sie haben ein spezielles Typ vom Mineral, das sie machen jetzt einen neuen Prozess, wo sie Carbon Credits, also CO2 Zertifikate bekommt, weil sie können CO2 einspritzen und dadurch verändert sich natürlich die chemische Struktur. Das heißt, sie machen dann Carbonat draus und der Carbonat bindet das CO2. Das ist ein Prozess, wo sie sozusagen ein sehr CO2-freundliches Nickel haben, was natürlich dann für die Industrie extrem wichtig ist. I think this CO2 is a very smart idea. Then every production company, I call for BMW, Mercedes, looking for a CO2 reduced product for battery or steel or something like that. So I think this is a very smart move and a lucky move, I must say. That's not something what you can have a control on it. It's the material, that's the rock itself. Yeah. So it's a lucky bonus what you get out of this project. So very, very interesting. Also sie haben das CO2, das Erz kann CO2 absorbieren, weil sie ein Carbonat bildet und dadurch können sie das nutzen und sie kriegen CO2-Zertifikate und das ist natürlich dann wahnsinnig gefragt. Sie haben auch im Erz ein sehr reines Erz drinnen, ohne sehr viel Eisen. Das führt zu einer höheren Konzentration des Nickelkonzentrats und macht es natürlich dann leichter, das zu verkaufen. Das sieht man hier. Sie haben sehr gute Relations mit den First Nations, ist ganz wichtig. First Nations sind ganz spannend. Und der Plan ist eigentlich, dass man Mitte 2025 eine Produktionsentscheidung trifft. Vergessen Sie, 2019 erst angefangen, 2025 ist quasi Produktionsentscheidung, 2028 wird der Betrieb gehen, aber es besteht natürlich die Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass irgendein Großer herkommt und das dann dementsprechend übernimmt. Die Pre-Feasibility oder PEA, was sie gemacht haben, hat ungefähr von CapEx-Kosten von 1,2 Milliarden gesprochen. Die Nickelindustrie will mehr Nickel haben, deswegen werden sie da wahrscheinlich die CapEx nach oben ziehen, aber ja, das heißt, das spricht eindeutig für einen Großen und die Großen sind halt langsam und deswegen ist das eigentlich ein Übernahmekandidat, ein klassischer. Ich glaube nicht, dass sie selber finanzieren, um in Produktion zu gehen. Und da sieht man halt unten die Preise, was da bezahlt worden ist und wo jetzt die Valuation ist. Der Aktienkurs ist massiv nach unten gekommen. Die letzte Finanzierung haben es teilweise je nachdem Flow-Through und so weiter bis zu $4 gemacht. Momentan ist der Aktienkurs, zumindest laut der Präsentation, 28. September 1,42. Ich habe vorher mal geschaut, glaube ich, wir waren bei 1,16. 1,60 irgendwo in dem Dreh. Sie haben 85 Millionen investiert. Ich meine, von der Bewertung her ist es eindeutig. Es ist natürlich was längerfristiges, nichts kurzfristiges, ganz klar, logisch, das dauert seine Zeit, aber bevor natürlich eine Produktionsentscheidung kommt, muss die Übernahme da sein. Wenn die Produktionsentscheidung 2025 ist, dann wird die Übernahme vorher sein, geht gar nicht anders, weil ein Großer will sein eigenes Design draufsetzen, der übernimmt nicht anders. Also der schaut es dann nochmal an und macht es dann so, wie es er will. Deswegen wird er da zuvorkommen. Ja, das war ein Startinterview, Kanada Nickel, Mark Selby am 11. November, Faschingsbeginn. Viel Spaß, viel Erfolg. Wir schauen Sie die Company auf jeden Fall weiter an. Mark, thank you for your time. Good luck.